Hey everyone, and welcome to a deep dive that's going to get us thinking about, well, being. Today we're tackling the ideas of Martin Heidegger,
Yeah, Heidegger.
a philosopher who can be a bit of a brain twister, but
He can be. He can be.
trust me, it's worth the effort.
Absolutely.
So to unpack all of this, we've got excerpts from Artur Lette's book, El fracaso del ser, which helps to make sense of Heidegger's project.
A great resource, for sure.
And of course, we'll be looking at sections from Heidegger's own masterpiece, Being and Time.
It's a must-read if you really want to dive deep into Heidegger, though.
It's dense.
It can be a tough one, yeah.
So maybe we can help out a little with that today.
That's the goal, to make these complex ideas a bit more accessible.
Now, you mentioned that Heidegger is one of those thinkers who wanted to both build upon and challenge the entire history of philosophy.
Right. He was trying to do something really ambitious. Like, he saw himself as both culminating and kind of destroying the Western philosophical tradition.
It's a lot to take on.
It is, but that's Heidegger for you. He believed that understanding being, what it means for something to exist, was like the most fundamental question.
The most fundamental question, exactly.
And also one that had been mishandled for centuries.
Yeah, he felt that philosophy had gotten off track, that it had lost sight of what was truly important.
Okay, so how do we even begin to approach a question as big as being?
Well, that's where Heidegger's approach gets really interesting, and this is where that term fundamental ontology comes in.
Fundamental ontology, for those of us who haven't spent years in a philosophy department, what does that even mean?
Well, imagine trying to understand, let's say, light.
Okay.
But before you start, breaking it down into colors,
Right.
or measuring its wavelengths,
Got it.
or even studying how it behaves in different situations.
Oh, okay, yeah.
You're just trying to grasp what light is at its most basic level.
I see. You're getting at like the essence of light before we start analyzing it.
Exactly, and that's what Heidegger was doing with being, trying to get to the most basic experience of it, before we slap all sorts of labels and categories on it.
So instead of starting with these grand theories, he starts with our everyday experience.
That's the key. Everyday experience.
How we actually encounter and interact with the world around us.
And he even uses the simple act of, like, putting on shoes as an example.
Putting on shoes?
Yeah, like, how do we understand those shoes? Not as just objects, but as things that we have a relationship with.
It's interesting that Late uses that example in his book as a way into Heidegger's thinking.
It sounds silly, but it's actually a really profound way to think about it.
Yeah, it's those everyday things that we often take for granted.
Exactly.
But Heidegger is saying, hey, look closer. There's something more going on here.
There's a deeper level of meaning.
And this is where his concept of Dasein comes in, right?
Right, Jace.
Another one of those Heidegger words.
Gotta love him.
What's the key idea here?
Well, Dasein, which you can kind of think of as being there, is Heidegger's term for the unique way that we as humans exist in the world.
Okay.
It's not about saying that humans are, the center of the universe or anything like that.
Right.
It's more about recognizing that our way of being is fundamentally intertwined with our understanding of being itself.
So it's not just that we exist, it's how we exist.
We exist, yes.
In the world, with other people, experiencing time, all of that. That becomes like the starting point for understanding anything else.
Exactly. And this is where Heidegger really breaks away from, traditional philosophy.
Okay.
He's saying we can't understand being as if we were just neutral observers looking in from the outside.
Like scientists in a lab.
Right. We're always already involved. We're part of the world, and that changes everything.
And Heidegger also dives deep into the concept of temporality. And I know this isn't just about clock time, right?
No, not at all. He's not talking about seconds, minutes, hours. He's talking about how our experience of time, the past, the present, and the future,
Okay.
are all woven together, kind of intertwined, to shape our existence.
So the way we experience time isn't just some external thing.
It's not external.
It's fundamental to who we are and how we understand our being in the world.
Exactly. It's the very structure of our being.
Okay. That's a pretty mind-blowing idea.
It is, and it gets even more intense.
How so?
Well, because Heidegger brings in this concept of anxiety
Anxiety.
as something that reveals the groundlessness of existence.
Groundlessness. What does that even mean?
It means that there's no ultimate foundation or security to our being.
Like the rug could be pulled out from under us at any moment.
In a way, yeah, but Heidegger doesn't necessarily see this as a bad thing.
Oh.
He sees anxiety as a way of waking up to the reality of our existence, that it's finite.
We're not here forever.
Exactly, and we're always moving towards the future, toward,
Death.
yes, death.
Okay, heavy stuff.
It is, but he doesn't see death as something to fear, but as kind of a horizon.
A horizon.
Yeah, against which our lives unfold, clarifying our understanding of time and being itself.
So we're being towards death, as he puts it.
Exactly. We are beings who are always aware, at some level, of our own finitude.
I'm starting to see why people find Heidegger both fascinating and challenging.
He definitely makes you think.
So how does all of this connect to his idea of truth? I know he had a very different take on it than what we usually think of as truth.
Oh, he did. He rejected that traditional view of truth,
So the idea that it's like a perfect match between what we say and how the world actually is.
That's when he thought that was too simplistic.
Instead, he uses this Greek word, aletheia.
Aletheia, yeah.
Which means
unconcealment.
Unconcealment. So truth isn't something that we just possess. It's more like something that gets revealed to us.
Exactly. It's an event, a happening.
Think of those moments when something suddenly clicks and you see things in a whole new light.
Like a flash of insight?
Yeah. That's aletheia truth as a dynamic process of being uncovered or unveiled.
Precisely. It's not about having this perfectly accurate picture of reality, but about being open to how truth shows itself to us.
Often in very unexpected ways.
He even connected this to Plato's allegory of the cave.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one from Philosophy 101.
The prisoners mistaking shadows for reality.
Right.
Heidegger saw that as a metaphor for how we need to kind of break free from our fixed perspective.
To step out of the cave.
Into the open space where truth can reveal itself. And he believed that art plays a key role in this.
Wait, art? What does art have to do with uncovering truth?
Well, for Heidegger, art wasn't just about beauty or personal taste. He believed that art could create this clearing.
A clearing?
Yeah, like a space where the truth of being can be unconcealed. He uses the example of Van Gogh's painting of those peasant shoes.
Oh, yeah, I love that painting.
To show how art can reveal the essence of things.
So it's like art can help us see beyond our usual ways of thinking and perceiving to get a glimpse of something deeper, about the world and our place in it.
That's a great way to put it. It's about art's power to show us something true about being itself.
This is all incredibly thought-provoking.
Heidegger will do that to you.
But Heidegger didn't stop there, did he? He also had this very specific view of history, and I know he was pretty critical of how philosophy had kind of led us astray, especially in the modern era.
You're right. He believed that the meaning of being has shifted throughout history, and he was really concerned with what he called the history of being in the West, culminating in this sort of forgetfulness of being.
Almost like we've forgotten what it even means to be.
Yeah, he called it the oblivion of being.
The oblivion of being.
And he believed this was really tied to the rise of technology and what he called enframing.
Okay, enframing. Another one of those Heidegger terms. Can you explain that one? And how does all of this relate to his critique of technology? I think this is where a lot of people start to find Heidegger really controversial.
Yeah, his views on technology are definitely some of his most provocative ideas.
But I think to understand them, we need to understand what he meant by enframing.
Right. So imagine you're looking at the world through, let's say, a window.
Okay.
You only see what fits within that frame. You miss everything else.
So enframing is like a way of seeing, kind of like a filter that shapes how we understand the world.
Exactly. And Heidegger believed that technology, especially in our modern world, creates this kind of enframing that reduces everything to a resource.
Something to be used and controlled.
Which leads to this oblivion of being. Like, we forget about the wonder of existence because we're so focused on manipulating and controlling everything.
So Heidegger isn't saying that technology is inherently evil or anything like that.
No, not necessarily.
But that the way we're using it, the way it's shaping our thinking, is kind of leading us away from this more authentic way of understanding ourselves and the world.
Right. It's like we're losing touch with something essential about what it means to be.
But if technology is so ingrained in our lives, is there even a way back from this oblivion of being? Is there any hope for a different way of being in the world?
That's a great question. And it leads us to Heidegger's later work, where he really explores these possibilities for what he calls an other beginning, a way of thinking and being that moves beyond the limits of technology and the whole metaphysical mindset that he believes has dominated Western thought for centuries.
This is all getting very deep. It sounds like we need to take a break and let this all sink in a bit.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground already.
When we come back, I'm hoping we can explore some of Heidegger's ideas about how to actually find our way back to a more authentic way of being in the world.
That's exactly what we'll be doing, so stay tuned. Welcome back to our Heidegger Deep Dive. Before the break, we were just starting to talk about how technology can lead to a kind of forgetfulness of being.
Yeah, that oblivion of being.
Exactly. And he believed that the way we interact with the world, even the tools we use, have this really profound impact on how we understand ourselves and our place in it all.
It's a pretty unsettling thought that the very things we rely on to make sense of the world could be, obscuring something essential about what it even means to be.
It's like we're blinded by our own creations.
So if technology has led us down this path, is there any way to find our way back to a more, authentic experience of being?
That's the question that really drove a lot of Heidegger's later work.
Okay.
He believed that, while technology itself isn't the problem, the way we've been using it,
Right.
and the kind of thinking that underlies it, our whole technological society, that this has created this kind of disconnect between us and the world.
Okay.
He saw it as a symptom of what he called metaphysics.
Okay. Metaphysics. I know that's a big word with a lot of different baggage.
It definitely does. It's been used in so many ways.
What did Heidegger mean by it?
Well, for him...
And why did he think it was a problem?
Okay, so he saw metaphysics as this way of thinking.
Okay.
That tries to grasp being in terms of fixed categories,
right,
concepts, systems,
Trying to pin it down.
Exactly. And he felt that this approach led to a kind of abstraction.
Abstract.
A detachment from that lived experience of being in the world that he saw as, essential.
So it's like we've gotten so caught up in our theories and explanations that we've lost touch with the actual experience of being.
It's like trying to capture being in this net of concepts.
But it always slips through.
Exactly.
Okay.
And Heidegger believed that this metaphysical mindset, right, it kind of reached its culmination in modern technology.
Okay.
Which he saw as the ultimate expression of, our desire to control and manipulate the world.
And bend it to our will.
You got it.
But if we're so deeply embedded in this metaphysical way of thinking...
Yeah, it's like the water we swim in.
Is there any way out?
That's the big question.
Heidegger did talk about the possibility of an other beginning, right?
He did.
A new way of thinking and being in the world.
Mm-hmm.
What did he see as the path toward this other beginning?
Well, Heidegger believed that the key, or at least a key, lay in rethinking our relationship with language.
With language.
However, he saw language as that house of being.
Oh, right.
The dwelling place where being kind of manifests itself.
So he's not just talking about language as, a tool for communication.
No, not just that.
But as the very medium through which being comes to life.
Like language is the air that being breathes.
That's a pretty radical idea.
It is.
Most of us just take language for granted.
Totally. We don't really think about it as this,
this force.
This profound force.
That shapes how we experience the world.
Exactly. And Heidegger was particularly interested in the, poetic dimensions of language.
Poetic dimensions, what do you mean by that?
The way it can evoke moods, right?
Yeah.
Create these atmospheres, point beyond itself to something deeper.
It's not just about conveying information.
No.
It's about creating meaning.
Yes.
Connecting with something beyond the purely rational or conceptual.
That's it. And he felt that we've become so used to language in this purely instrumental way.
Just to label things.
Labeling, categorizing, controlling.
Right.
That we've lost touch with its power to really reveal the world.
In all its mystery.
And wonder.
This reminds me of Heidegger's fascination with the poet Hölderlin.
Hölderlin, yeah.
Didn't he see Hölderlin's poetry as a model for a kind of thinking that could, lead us out of this metaphysical impasse?
Absolutely. He saw in Hölderlin a poet who was so deeply attuned to the rhythms of nature and the mystery of being.
He really responded to that.
He did, and he felt that Hölderlin's poetry, with its evocative imagery and its refusal to be pinned down by rigid concepts.
It's very fluid.
It is. That it offered a glimpse of a different way of thinking and being in the world.
So instead of trying to force being into our pre-made conceptual boxes, we need to be more open to how it reveals itself through language, through art, through our lived experience.
It's about listening to the world, not just imposing our own categories on it.
That's beautifully put.
Heidegger believed that by cultivating this more receptive and poetic way of thinking, we could begin to move beyond those limitations of that metaphysical mindset.
Right.
And find a way to dwell more authentically in the world.
This all sounds very abstract, though,
It does.
How do we actually put these ideas into practice? How can we cultivate this more poetic way of thinking in a world that's just so dominated by technology and, instrumental reason?
It's a really important question. And it leads us right into Heidegger's later work, where he explores the concept of dwelling in more depth.
Okay.
He believed that by really understanding what it means to dwell authentically,
Okay.
we could begin to find a way to live in harmony with the world, even in this technological age.
Dwelling. That's a word that has so many connotations.
It does. It does.
What did Heidegger mean by it? Is it just about, where we live, our physical houses?
No. For Heidegger, dwelling was about way more than just physical shelter.
Okay.
It was about inhabiting the world in this deep, meaningful way.
Okay.
Being attuned to the rhythms of nature, recognizing our interconnectedness with, like, all things, and finding a sense of belonging within what he called the fourfold.
The fourfold. There's another one of those Heidegger terms
I know, right?
that seems to encompass so much.
It does. It does.
Can you break that down for us a bit? What did he mean by earth, sky, mortals, and divinities?
Okay, so Heidegger saw this fourfold as a way of understanding how interconnected everything is.
Okay.
Earth represents, the material world,
The ground beneath our feet.
the ground of our being.
Okay.
Sky represents this open space of possibility, the realm of, the transcendent.
Looking up at the stars.
Exactly. Mortals are, well, us human beings, We dwell between earth and sky.
Right. Caught in the middle.
And divinities, well, that represents the sacred, the
Okay.
mysterious dimension of being that calls to us, from beyond our everyday experience.
So the fourfold is like a map of existence. It shows us how everything is connected, how we're all part of this larger web of being.
Exactly. And Heidegger felt that we've lost touch with this interconnectedness.
In our modern world.
Yeah, that we've become alienated from the earth, from the sky, from each other.
Even from ourselves.
He saw it as a direct result of that metaphysical thinking, that we've come to see the world as just, a collection of objects,
To be used and controlled.
instead of a living whole to be respected and cherished.
It sounds like he's calling for a kind of radical shift in perspective.
He is,
A way of seeing ourselves not as separate from the world.
but as embedded within it.
But how do we actually make that shift? How do we move from this abstract understanding of the fourfold? Right.
Yeah, actually living in a way that honors this interconnectedness.
That's where his emphasis on dwelling really comes in.
Okay.
He believed that by cultivating certain practices, by paying attention to how we, inhabit the world,
Okay.
and finding ways to really reconnect with those rhythms of nature,
Mm-hmm.
we could begin to kind of heal this alienation and find our way back to a more authentic way of being.
It sounds like he's offering a path toward a more, grounded and meaningful way of life.
I think he is.
But it also seems incredibly challenging.
Oh, it is. It is.
Can you give us some specific examples of what he meant by dwelling and how we might cultivate it in our own lives?
That's a great question, and it's one that we'll explore more in the final part of our deep dive.
Okay, looking forward to it.
We'll look at how Heidegger saw the role of things like art and architecture, even technology, in shaping how we dwell, and what his ideas might mean for all of us as we try to navigate the complexities of,
Modern life.
modern life. Exactly.
Yeah.
Welcome back to our Heidegger deep dive. We've been exploring some pretty heady concepts like being, temporality, and how technology might be leading us toward what Heidegger called the oblivion of being.
Right, some big ideas.
But I'm hoping we can get a little more practical in this last part.
Yeah, let's try to bring it down to earth a bit.
In the last part, you mentioned that Heidegger saw dwelling as kind of this path toward a more authentic way of being in the world, even in this, tech-driven age.
Mm.
I'm really curious to unpack what that actually means.
It is a fascinating and challenging concept.
It is.
This idea of dwelling, Heidegger was trying to get at something very fundamental about how we inhabit the world,
Mm-hmm.
how we make it our home.
Okay.
Not just in a physical sense, like
Right.
having a house,
Yeah.
but in a much deeper, existential sense.
So it's not just about having a roof over our heads. It's about something more like feeling truly at home in the world.
That's it. Exactly. Heidegger felt that, in our modern technological world, we've become really good at manipulating and controlling our environment.
Yeah, we can build anything, go anywhere.
But in doing so, we've lost touch with a more, how do I say it?
Essential.
A more essential way of being in the world.
Okay.
A way of being that he saw as more receptive,
Yeah.
more attuned to those rhythms of nature and more connected to the things around us.
I can definitely relate to that feeling of disconnect, It's like we're always striving, achieving, acquiring, trying to be in control.
Always on the go.
But we rarely just stop to just be in the world.
To appreciate it.
To appreciate it.
Yeah.
But if we've lost touch with this way of dwelling, how do we find our way back to it?
Well, Heidegger thought that there were certain practices, certain ways of like paying attention to the world
Okay.
that can help us to cultivate a more authentic way of dwelling.
What kinds of practices?
He was really interested in the role of art and architecture, for example, which he saw as having this power to kind of reveal the world to us in new ways,
Okay.
to make us more aware of the things that we so often just take for granted.
So it's not just about looking at a painting or admiring a building. It's about how those things can actually change our way of seeing the world.
Exactly.
Okay. How so? Can you give us an example of what this might look like? How does a work of art or a building create this clearing that Heidegger talks about?
Well, think about how you feel when you, let's say, walk into a truly awe-inspiring cathedral.
Okay.
The soaring arches, the stained glass windows filtering the light,
Creating those beautiful colors.
the sense of stillness, that feeling of sacred space.
Mhm.
It's not just about the physical structure. It's about how that structure shapes our experience,
Okay.
how it evokes a sense of wonder, of connection to something larger than ourselves.
It's interesting that you mention a cathedral because I'm not a religious person, but I have definitely felt that sense of like awe and transcendence in those kinds of spaces.
And that's what Heidegger was getting at. He wasn't saying, like, everyone needs to go back to church or anything like that.
Right.
But he believed that we can learn a lot from how certain structures, certain art forms have traditionally helped people to connect with that sense of the sacred,
Okay.
to experience the world as, something more than just a collection of objects.
So it's about finding those spaces, those experiences that can help us break out of our, everyday routines and connect with something deeper.
Something that reminds us of our place in the world.
Something that reminds us of our connection to something, larger than ourselves. But it's not just about art and architecture, is it? Didn't Heidegger also see a role for technology in all of this, in rethinking dwelling?
He did. He recognized that technology was just an inescapable part of the modern world.
It's not going away.
Right. And he didn't think we could or should simply reject it.
Okay.
But he did believe that we needed to find a way to use technology more thoughtfully in a way that would support rather than undermine our ability to dwell authentically.
That seems like a really tough balance to strike, Technology can be so seductive.
It is so convenient.
So convenient that it's easy to let it just take over our lives.
It happens to the best of us.
To let it dictate how we spend our time and how we relate to the world.
Yeah, we become almost like slaves to our devices.
But Heidegger believed it was possible to use technology in a way that would actually enhance our experience of being in the world.
He did. He saw the potential there.
What did he have in mind?
Well, for example, he saw the potential for technology to help us connect with nature in new ways.
Oh, interesting.
To create spaces that would foster a sense of community and belonging.
Okay.
And even to support a more, contemplative and mindful way of life.
I think a lot of people would be surprised to hear Heidegger talking about technology this way.
I know he gets this reputation as being anti-technology.
He's often portrayed as a, technophobe, someone who saw technology as inherently destructive.
Right. And while he was definitely critical of how technology had been used, I think it's important to remember that he wasn't against technology in and of itself. He was against this kind of thinking, this worldview, that led us to use it in such a destructive way, to both ourselves and the planet.
So it's not about rejecting technology. It's about finding a way to use it more consciously.
More ethically.
More ethically, in a way that aligns with our values and our understanding of what it means to, live a good life.
Exactly.
And I think that's a message that's more relevant than ever today.
Especially today.
As we're all grappling with the increasingly pervasive role of technology in our lives.
It's everywhere.
Heidegger's work challenges us to step back, to question those assumptions that we have about progress and efficiency.
And to ask those hard questions.
To ask ourselves what kind of world we really want to create with these powerful tools that we have.
It's a responsibility we all share.
This deep dive into Heidegger's philosophy has been a real journey.
It has.
It's given me a lot to think about, especially in terms of how I want to live my life in a world that often feels very chaotic and overwhelming.
I hear that.
I think his ideas about dwelling, about finding ways to connect with a sense of meaning and belonging, are really powerful.
They are powerful.
And I'm definitely going to be pondering them for a long time to come.
I think that's the power of Heidegger.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't give us those easy answers, but he asks us the right questions.
The questions that can help us to live more consciously, more authentically, and more in harmony with the world around us.
Beautifully put.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to thank you for guiding us through the twists and turns of Heidegger's thought.
My pleasure.
It's been challenging, but ultimately very rewarding.
It has.
And for our listeners, I hope this has, sparked your curiosity and inspired you to continue exploring these big questions.
The big questions, yeah.
About what it means to be human, to dwell in the world, and to find a sense of meaning and purpose in our lives.
That's what it's all about.
Thanks for joining us.
Until next time.